How can I tell if a web address is safe? Hi everyone, Leo Notenboom here for askleo.com. Here's the question I got. Security when clicking onto a website confounds me. Some sites put the section of the site you are wanting ahead of the web address, for example, photos.kodak.com, and some put the section after the example, kodak.com/photos. These examples are just made up, but I hope you understand what I'm saying. How do I know if I'm on the secure website I'm supposed to be on? At times I see other addresses flashing by on the toolbar that are not the site I clicked on before the actual site appears. Yeah, it's a simple question. And unfortunately, I'm going to call it opening a Pandora's box of issues that relate to how URLs are constructed, which we'll talk about, and in some cases, how URLs are used. But it's important information to understand so that, like you say, you know you're going to the site you think you are. So there are what I'm going to call three basic components to a URL. A URL is short for Uniform Resource Locator. Basically, it's the thing that identifies something else, where that something else is digitally. The one you are by far most familiar with is HTTP and HTTPS. So the primary components of a full web address, I'm going to use an example. The first part, the domain, in my example, https:// that tells me it's a website, www.somerandomservice.com. This identifies the server, the actual physical computer somewhere out on the internet to which you are going to be connecting. HTTP identifies the protocol, but the rest identifies the machine, the actual machine that you're connecting to. Now, following that, you'll often see things like folder/page. In your example, you had kodak.com/photos. It's the photos part of that example. This specifies exactly what it is you're requesting from the server. Literally, it started out and is often mostly the same kind of thing you might see in your file explorer. It's folders full of pages. So you might have a folder called photos and then a page on it called summerphotos.html. Then, by requesting that, the server that you've connected to now knows what page you want, and it sends the page to you. Following that, there can also be what are called parameters. Question mark, parameter equals value, ampersand, parameter equals value, and that can go on for actually many different parameters. These are computers we're talking about. And while a page sometimes is a page, it's just a piece of HTML code that gets copied to your screen when you asked for it, very often, in fact, I'd probably say most of the time these days, it's not. It's actually a small computer program that generates the page on the fly. The parameters, then, are pieces of information that are passed to that program and give it information that, for that particular display, will make it happen a particular way. You might say, parameter equal, username equals Leo, or country equals US, or language equals EN. Those are the kinds of things you might see on a full URL. Now, we need to talk about where those pieces actually start and where they end, because this is where things start to get misused by spammers. So, the server that's being contacted begins after the HTTPS:// or HTTP if you're still doing that, but it then ends at the immediately following slash. So, for example, in this URL, https:// www.somerandomservice.com/ a bunch of other stuff, the server name begins after the double slash and ends at the very next slash. www.somerandomservice.com. Now, that can be misused. For example, what if you saw an URL that looked like https://www.somerandomservice.com/www.paypal.com? It might be easy to think that you're connecting to paypal.com, especially if there isn't enough room in your browser's address bar or wherever to show you the entire URL. That www.paypal.com there has nothing to do with PayPal. That, because it's after that slash, means that it's a page on the server, somerandomservice.com. You've not connected to PayPal. You've connected to somerandomservice.com that is then serving you up a page named www.paypal.com. And yes, that can happen. Let's look at the other end of the URL or of the server name. Server names are essentially what are called domain names. askleo.com is a domain name. Somerandomservice.com is a domain name. These are things you purchase, you register. Like I have registered askleo.com, and coincidentally, I've registered somerandomservice.com. The stuff that goes in front of that, though, like the www, that's up to you. Once you own the server name, somerandomservice.com, you can do anything you want in front of it. www is one of them. In your example, photos.kodak.com is another approach. The difference is that by convention, everything that's in front of, or everything is part of that domain name and just in front of it, references a specific server. So that means that, in theory, www.somerandomservice.com and somerandomservice.com without the www could be two completely different servers. Typically, they aren't, for obvious reasons. The www is kind of optional, and it's there and it's not. But specifically for your Kodak example, that's a great way to manage the infrastructure. Kodak.com might be their sales site. Photos.kodak.com might be their photo collection site on completely separate machines. Okay, great. We could do all sorts of stuff in front of the domain name. What if we did this? www.paypal.com.somerandomservice.com. What are we getting? Once again, it is not paypal.com. We are accessing a server identified by www.paypal.com.somerandomservice.com, which is owned by somerandomservice.com. In other words, it's probably trying to trick you. Once again, if your address bar is not big enough to show you the entire URL, it is possible you could see https://www.paypal.com and not realize that there's more to the story. And that more to the story is taking you to a completely different place. Another example, a really extreme example, is setting up a site called www.paypal.com/many-somerandomservice.com. Totally legit domain name. And as you can tell, if your address bar isn't big enough, you wouldn't realize that somerandomservice.com was involved at all. So it is important to understand just what those pieces are and what they mean. The only thing that truly is paypal.com in my examples is something that says paypal.com/. And that has to be the first single slash in the URL. PayPal may have wwws in front of it. It may even have its own subdomains, as they're called, in front of the paypal.com. But paypal.com/ is paypal.com. Now, things get even weirder. I told you this was a Pandora's box. %2f. One of the things that character encoding allows you to do is to encode any character using its numeric equivalent. That's particularly important for either characters that are not visible, like say a space, which by the way is %20, or not printable, like backspace or Control-G or any of a number of other characters. So that's what the % allows you to do. And as it turns out, %2f is a slash. What that means is that when the browser sees it, it treats it exactly like a slash. So once again, remember, the server being contacted is the server after the HTTPS // and ends at the next slash. In an example on the site, I've got https://www.somerandomservice.com %2f/www.paypal.com. What that's really accessing is somerandomservice.com /www.paypal.com. In other words, it's not going to PayPal. It's going to some random service because that's where the slash was placed, even though it didn't look like a slash. Now, one final thing I want you to understand, and that is HTTPS and secure websites. Connecting to an HTTPS website confirms that you have connected to the site you asked for. But it is not necessarily the site you think it is. That example just up above, https://www.somerandomservice.com /www.paypal.com, could absolutely be HTTPS. And you might think that it's accessing or going to paypal.com because of the way it's constructed. Except it's not. The server you're going to is somerandomservice.com, and that's the server you asked for, regardless of what server you think you are asking for. My point here is that about HTTPS, you can't read too much into it. It's important to ensure that when you ask for the correct site, you are getting to the correct site, and that your communications with that site are indeed secure, but it is not telling you that you're connecting to the site you think you are. That's an important distinction. So what really is the bottom line here? Well, for any URL you're about to click on, pay extremely close attention to everything between the HTTPS // and the immediately following slash. That is the domain. That is the name of the server you're actually connecting to. Everything else is potentially distraction. For updates, for comments, for links related to this topic and more, visit askleo.com /4399. I'm Leo Notenboom, and this is askleo.com. Thanks for watching.